Good morning, welcome back to another episode of Coffee at Rosevine Cottage. I am so glad you're here. Take a moment, grab a cup of coffee, and then we're gonna get started. The last couple of weeks we've been digging into Judges, and this week we are in Judges 6 again. And this particular chapter of Judges holds so much wisdom that we could use when we're looking to find our calling. Often I think we're a bit hard on Gideon. We tend to point out his shortcomings, his faults, his doubts, and his fears when these are the very things that often allow us to relate to him. One of the things that sticks out to me the most when it comes to Judges 6 is that God doesn't call us what we are. He doesn't call him frightened. He doesn't call him he was hiding. Instead, God calls him as if Gideon had already stepped into the role God set for him. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak of Oprah that belonged to Uzziah the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Judges 6:11-12. At that moment, threshing wheat, Gideon is so far from his destiny. He was living under the oppression of the Midianites, frightened for his life, and driven to attempt the impossible task of threshing wheat in a winepress, and to us it seemed far from his calling. Your past, your background, your shortcomings cannot stand in the way of what God wants to do in your life. Gideon is the perfect example of this. At our first look at this biblical figure, he is anything but a mighty warrior. But God, in his amazing wisdom, can take what is not enough and turn it into a beacon of hope to shine through the centuries to meet you and me right where we are today. So often we hold these things that we believe disqualify us when in reality these are the very things that God wants to use. If Gideon had already been a mighty warrior, there wouldn't be this opening to encourage us today. Because let's face it, how many of us feel like mighty warriors? Gideon was just going about his everyday, ordinary life. His average, there was nothing extraordinary about it. Can you relate? Until God stepped in and met him in the midst of the ordinary. I think we think that God is looking for something special, something out of the ordinary to use, when in fact, he's just looking for us. Are you rooted in a dysfunctional place, afraid to be seen, and questioning your worth? Maybe deep down you know that God calls you his child, that he loves you and he cares for you. But you can't see yourself in that light. Instead, you see your shortcomings, the broken places, and the things that you wish you could change. God doesn't see us through our eyes, or even the world's eyes. He sees us through the lens of who he created us to be, and he calls us by that name. You are the child that he crossed through eternity to save and set free. You aren't bound by your background or the places you've been. It doesn't matter if you don't feel like you're enough, or you think that you're too insignificant to be used. He's calling. Listen for his voice and find your calling. Gideon's story is probably one of the biggest turnarounds in the Bible. From threshing wheat in a winepress to firmly planted in the role God has for him. Did he still have doubts? Did God still have to take his hand and walk him through the places he wasn't sure of? Absolutely. But his questions and fears did not hold him back from following God's call. Finding your calling begins with digging, with trusting God knows the future, trusting that his vision of us is far better than our own. It requires us stepping out of our wine presses and stepping into the light. It is far easier to stay in the shadows, safe in our comfort zone, but to find your calling, we must step out and embrace the calling God has planned for us. How do you find your calling? Digging into your Bible. Learn it, study it, read it diligently day after day after day. Nothing will grow your faith as quickly like diligent Bible reading. Spend time in prayer. Prayer is an important part of your walk with Christ. He wants you to come with your thanksgiving and with your need. Surround yourself with other believers. Finding other Christians to walk with will give you someone to lean on when you are discouraged and someone to share your joys, but you'll also have someone to pray with you and for you. Finally, find a church